If this is your first time here, welcome. During our shows, we interview successful entrepreneurs and investors to spread knowledge, advice, and actionable tactics to help others in the pursuit of financial freedom. We discuss successes, failures, systems, motivations, experiences, and key lessons learned along the way in the hopes that these stories help you along your journey. Tune in every Wednesday to get your weekly juice. If you've been here before and like what you've been hearing, please subscribe, share with friends, rate, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That goes an extremely long way for us. It's simple. Just click on your podcast app, type in our podcast name, The Weekly Juice, click on the reviews, and let us know what you think. The more ratings we get, the more eyes we'll get on our show, and in turn, we'll be able to provide you all with high-quality guests. You can also find us on Instagram at Weekly Juice Pod for daily content and personal finance tips to assist in your journey towards financial freedom. Shang, welcome to the Weekly Juice. We're very excited to have you. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you guys for having me. So glad to be here.
You're very welcome. If you could just give people a little bit of a background on who you are, where you're from, and then your story to reaching financial independence.
Great. I'm Shang. I'm online on Instagram at Save My Cents. I live in New York City, and I reached the ability to work optional at age 31. I'm 35 now, so I've been spending the last few years documenting my journey on Instagram and also inspiring others to take the steps necessary to design a financial life that focuses on what you value the most. And for me, it is not putting my career and love of money above my family and my loved ones. This story kind of started, I would say, very early on. In my early 20s, I went to Harvard. I graduated into the field of management consulting. I'd always wanted to make it big. I'm ambitious. I want to be a CEO. I want to be a boss. When I was in my early 20s, making money was more the goal. It wasn't so much about saving money, but I did save quite a lot. I had 5 figures income, and I saved about 30% of that gross each year. And I started investing that really young. It wasn't until I met my husband, and we met as classmates at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And at that time, I started becoming a little bit more frugal. I was working at startups, so I had a feeling that I might not make a lot of money coming out, going into a startup. So I was like, okay, got to keep my spending in check. And then when my husband and I started talking about money after marriage, we talked a lot about money while being engaged. He's like, what if we could exit the rat race? What if we get away from this notion that a family has to be a 2-income family, that we would never have to worry about being unemployed for the rest of our lives? And I said, how do you plan on doing that? And he said, we would need to learn to live off of the lower of our 2 incomes and just invest the rest. That was the mechanics. And so I said, this is crazy, but I like it because I'd heard so many people around me already struggling with the idea of being a working mom. And I said, that's going to come down. That's going to happen to me one day. I don't want to struggle as much with that. And so we began saving, living really frugally, and saved and invested. And crazy enough, by the time that I hit age 31, that work optionality became true. And we just kept going because we didn't have kids at the time. But as of this week for the recording, I went part-time at my job to
oh, wow. Congratulations.
more time. Thank you.
That's the whole goal. That's great.
That was the goal, is to get more time back to be with my kid, who's now just a little over a year old.
I find it really interesting how your husband is actually the man behind the curtain who gave you the idea, right? And you're showing on Instagram with, Save My Sense with all these followers, and it actually started from him, right? So or at least the idea, right? That idea came from, is it something that you think he learned in his background? I'm curious how that came to be within your family, like just the whole FIRE movement.
Neither of us knew that this is called the FIRE movement, by the way. We had no idea that this was even a thing. I came from an immigrant family. Both my parents have always been really, really frugal. My dad is also a stealthy multimillionaire, and he saved and invested. So I kind of seen that happen. My husband comes from a very, very average family, no wealth, nothing, but his mom has always been really good at saving money. And then my husband, on top of that, being a very numbers driven guy, just ran the numbers and like, wow, okay, you can just save and invest and grow a lot of wealth. But I think neither of us thought that it would happen so quickly. It was really, I owe it to us, being partners and helping each other through the tough times of being super frugal in a very expensive city of New York.
Can we talk about New York? I kind of want to go into that. Did you have something?
Sure.
I want to talk about, because there's a notion, San Francisco, Manhattan, or New York, and a number of other large cities, that this is not possible. Like, you can't do this in Manhattan. It's too expensive. Can you talk about your journey in Manhattan and maybe some of the specifics of what you did to cut back there?
Yeah, we had to go from what was historically for me a 30% savings rate to a 50% or greater saving rate. My husband is already a super frugal person, so this came more naturally to him. I, compared to most people, would be a great saver, but I was considered a spender in the relationship this time. And I graduated with tons of other MBAs who were doing quite well. And it was hard to see them spend a lot and then realize that I wasn't spending at all. My husband and I both benefited from six-figure salaries. So I do want to say we have the privilege of really high salaries. I graduated with no student loan debt, neither from undergrad nor business school. I had some scholarships and my parents paid the rest. My husband had a full ride undergrad and a half scholarship for business school. Then I used some of my existing net worth to pay off his student loans when we got married. So we started out marriage debt free. Then the biggest key thing in New York is getting your rents down. We found out about a rent stabilized apartment. I mean, rent control, rent stabilization is amazing for the tenant. We got into one of those, and that was key to getting the biggest cost down in New York. The apartment's nothing to write home about. It was 420 square feet, I believe, in total. The bathroom often broke down. The kitchen, I would have to cantilever the drying rack on top of my stove to let the water run down from the dishes because there was no dish rack and no dishwasher. And we just made it work. It was a lot of challenge, and it was being very creative. And at the end, it was all about adopting a gratitude mindset, saying, the world tells me this is not supposed to work, but I'm going to figure out, I'm going to recognize the basic privileges that I already have and just be grateful for everything that I do get to enjoy.
It's a really cool story of kind of putting your vision of what you want your life to be, like putting it into the future and saying, I'm going to make these sacrifices for now. Cause I imagine you're not living in that apartment anymore, right?
No.
Yeah, exactly. So you're saying I'm going to make these sacrifices for X amount of years, and in turn it'll pay off and I will become work optional, which you did in the past week, which is really cool. Did you have a question?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I think it's awesome to hear your story. And I'm wondering if you can dive into specific strategies on how you cut back on spending. I think a lot of people will think like, okay, I hear a 30 to 50% savings rate. That's incredible. But what luxuries are you not spending on, and maybe tactics that you use on a daily basis to cut back in certain areas?
Yeah, the housing was the biggest one, like getting that rent stabilized thing, that apartment saved us thousands of dollars a month off the bat. Number two was food, which is difficult because I'm a foodie. I liked my food, but I learned to cook and I calculated the per meal cost of each recipe that I made and then started to substitute in cheaper ingredients, like doing a lot of rice-based dishes, casseroles, and curries and things like that. Cooked for all of our meals, just cooked, like rarely ate out. The third area where my husband and I would love to spend a lot, but we didn't, was travel. We love to travel. He's been to, I want to say 70 countries, and I've been to 40 countries in my life. We did a lot of that via credit card points.
Travel hacking?
Yeah, travel hacking, points and miles. That's actually my husband's job. He deals with all the details of that, and I just go along and I sign up for the credit cards and I.
You got the easy part.
I got the easy part. Yeah, he's the one with the spreadsheets. Those are big ones. And then in New York, just you don't own a car. You don't need to own a car when you're in Manhattan. But even so, I also never took Ubers, like unless I was like sick. I made it a point to take the subway, take the buses, walk as much as possible, even if it meant getting drenched in a rainstorm.
Wow. So that's really cool that you mentioned these. And these are, to me, are like the three main pillars. You talk about your living expense, living and housing, your your car expense, and then also your food expense. Those are like the three main pillars I think about every month. I'm like, okay, how can I, for us, we're as real estate investors, we think about how many properties can we accumulate that'll basically give us income that'll capture that and pay for those expenses. So I'm curious, I did a little research and I know you have a strategy with your wardrobe. What is a capsule wardrobe?
This is a little bit more specific to perhaps the female listeners out there, but I say to everyone, if someone like a Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs can get away with wearing basically the same thing every day, so can I. And so with that principle in mind, I made an arbitrary limit. It doesn't have to be this way, but I said, I'm going to limit my professional wardrobe to about 30 pieces a season. Now, in New York does have 4 seasons. Some of those pieces swap in and out. And I have plenty of underwear and socks. Everyone's always like, but what about underwear? I'm like, dude, I'm not being crazy here.
Yeah, you're not washing the same.
Essential she's got.
All right. Just we're glad we covered that.
But that's a capsule wardrobe. And by focusing on fewer pieces, I actually got higher quality clothing. So they lasted longer. And I made sure that everything just matched. And I realized if I can't remember what my coworkers wore 2-3 days ago, then neither can my coworkers remember what I wore. So I showed up in very similar outfits all the time and none the wiser.
I love this. So I saw, I forget where exactly I saw it, but it said, I think it was Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, maybe Bezos as well. They do this capsule where it's like they have their clothes laid out and they only have specific amounts that they choose, that they pick. They don't even basically it eliminates another decision they have to make every single morning. And which is time, right? It's like, why think about something that's really not that important? Obviously you want to look good, but if you have your go-tos in your capsule that you can play around with, you're good to go. And it's funny. I have a very specific palette and like not that many different outfits that I rotate between. And I get crushed by my family members. They're like, dude, you're wearing the black shirt again. You're wearing that hoodie again. You're wearing the hat again. And I'm like, well, listen to Bezos, listen to Zuckerberg, look at them. I talk capsule wardrobe and they're like, dude, you're not a millionaire. You can't do that. I'm like, well, I'm on my way to be one because I don't have to make this decision. And so I saw it and I thought it was phenomenal. And it's my excuse to rock my favorite clothes over and over. So.
Time is money. In fact, almost everything that my husband and I try to optimize on, we have to make that trade-off between are we saving enough money? And then also, are we saving enough of our precious time that's being used to generate more income or more cash flow?
Absolutely. We talked a lot about in the last 15 minutes or so about the savings aspect, the 30 to 50% savings rate, and that you were the spender, even though you had a capsule wardrobe. So I beg to differ, but apparently compared to your husband, you were. So let's talk a little bit about the investing and creating that equity gap and how you just mentioned you were able to go work optional. What were some of the strategies you maybe took in the beginning or as you moved along the process to create this freedom in your early to mid 30s?
Yeah. I'm very lucky that I was exposed to investing in stocks at a very, very young age. My middle school had a stock investing class where we were taught how to read the stock charts in a newspaper. And then we were given a fake portfolio. It was like a software or something that you can buy a fake stock and see how it went. And I learned very quickly that I was very bad at picking individual stocks. I was so lucky that in my first job, which is actually the same company I work for today, I tried other things, but I came back to this company because they treat me really well. We are management consultants, and we actually do advise a lot of companies on mergers, acquisitions, things like that. Because of the nature of our job and the proprietary information that we are exposed to, I was advised by our legal counsel at a very young age saying, hey, all of you guys who are going to be investing, try to avoid individual stock picking. It's not like we can't, but we would have to document how we got our knowledge for all of those stock picks. So we were told, as fresh 21-year-olds coming out of college, to go for mutual funds. And I think that piece of advice really saved my investment life, because mutual funds, which now I do index funds, are so easy. I just buy and hold. Like, there's nothing that I do with it. And it just sits there and it grows because I'm buying into the entire United States stock market. The holdings it's been gangbusters in the last few years. And yes, we had that crazy drop back in March, but we survived and I just kept going. I bought during the great financial crisis at the bottom. I don't time my investments necessarily, but having invested through 2 recessions has taught me that it's actually more about controlling your emotions rather than being the best expert in investing at the end of the day.
I've been doing a lot of research on index funds. Essentially, they're a basket of funds as opposed to trying to beat the stock market. You go along with it. And I think
if you're cool with 10 or 11%, like why not?
Why not?
You just keep investing, right?
Set it and forget it. Yeah. Fidelity's awesome. Vanguard's phenomenal too. And I believe they have lower costs for like management fees. Can you maybe dive into a few of the index funds that you love, and maybe not your entire portfolio, but just like there's a few newer investors that say, hey, listen, like I've done some research. I'm in on index funds. What do you suggest I start with?
Yeah.
Maybe for a beginner.
So this is not investing advice. I have to make sure the SEC does not come crashing down on me if they ever hear this. Educational purposes only. There are 2 funds that I've commonly seen recommended by almost everybody in this space. One is VTSAX, VTSAX, which is an index fund from Vanguard that tracks the total stock market. And then there's VTI, which is literally the same thing, but it's an ETF, meaning that its price changes throughout the day, whereas VTSAX, its price changes just once a day. If you're a long-term investor, you're holding for many years, I couldn't care less what the difference is. So those are really great ways for people to get their feet wet. Now, there are other index funds that maybe include international holdings. There are funds that focus on small cap, like if you want to focus on smaller companies who may give you higher growth, but there's also higher risk, things like that. If you just Google top index funds, you'll see plenty of them out there. And so many of them are basically the same thing. The only thing that I encourage people to look into is your expenses. All else equal, if you buy the same index fund, they change the name, somebody else issues it, whichever fund has the lowest expense ratio is the one that's going to give you the most return, because that means you're spending less in fees to buy into this fund.
So with index funds, is it essentially you open up a brokerage account, and as you invest in these, obviously you want to do it for the long term, so as things compound on top of each other, right? And you ride the wave. Can you pull out at any point, or is it something similar to a retirement account where you have to push it down the line and you have to be a certain age to pull out of these funds?
Yeah. So what to distinguish between an account and an investment? Think of accounts like the soil that you're going to plant your seeds in. That can be a 401k, an IRA, a taxable brokerage account. But the seed that you plant in is the thing that actually grows over time. And that can be stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. When we say that we're going to invest in like a VTI in an index fund, that's the seed. You could buy a VTI in a 401k. You can also buy a VTI in a brokerage. As to the rules as to when you can liquidate and withdraw the cash, if you are in a retirement account, like a 401k or a IRA, then there might be early withdrawal limits preventing you from getting that money before age 59 and a half. A brokerage has no such restriction, but the savvy FIRE people do have a way of accessing their retirement accounts early through a couple of more complicated moves that are being shared today in the group as well.
Are we allowed to dive into those, or is this a backdoor IRA or? Not
quite, but you're getting there actually. So I do want to clarify what was meant by a backdoor IRA. There are people, if you're over a certain household income range, like call about 120,000 or so, you can no longer contribute to a Roth IRA, nor would you get a tax break by contributing to a traditional IRA. But a Roth IRA is a great tool because you put money into it, and then basically after that, it grows without taxes over time. A backdoor IRA basically allows you to put after-tax money into a traditional IRA. You don't get a tax deduction on it because you're over the income limit, but you convert it right away to a Roth. And you get a Roth IRA at the end of the day. It's like a crazy legal loophole that a lot of high earners take care of. That is for establishing a Roth IRA. What early retirement bloggers really care about is I want to be able to access my money, right? And that's what makes it a little bit different to fire off of stocks versus firing off of real estate. Because if you're real estate, you get that cash flow all the time from your homes, and there's no institution telling you can't get it because you're not age 59 and a half. For fire bloggers, the first thing that we typically would withdraw from would be our brokerages. Because of the immense amounts of money that we're investing into the market, we've already exceeded our 401k max. We've exceeded the IRA max. So, and also if you have an HSA or 529, we exceeded that too. The remainder goes into a taxable brokerage, which you can withdraw from at any point. But if you get to a point where you want to start withdrawing from your IRAs because you ran out of money in your brokerage, we do what is called a Roth conversion ladder. When you convert an IRA or a 401k, by the way, into a Roth IRA, that converted amount, after 5 years, you can withdraw without an early withdrawal penalty. So it's called a ladder because people starting 5 years before they're hoping to withdraw its money will start converting 1 year's of funds at a time. And then the next year you do it again. So over 5 years of time, you now have 5 Roth IRA amounts that you can pull away from each of the following years and live off of that without paying penalties.
Oh, can you, just so I can completely wrap my head around this, can you walk me through this example? Say someone has, I don't know, let's say roughly $100,000 in a 401k through their current company that they work for. How do they then use the ladder?
Yeah. Okay. First, you need money in a retirement account. So call that the $100,000 in a 401k. You also need some money outside of that account to pay for taxes. So let's say this person wants to withdraw $20,000 a year from this 401k. The first year you take $20,000, convert that into a Roth IRA. The IRS will say, well, you just recognized $20,000 of income this year because when you do the conversion, it's recognized as income. We're going to tax you. So you file the tax return, they'll tax you. And let's say that that person's tax rate is 25%. So 25% off of $20,000 is $5,000. It is strongly recommended that you pay that $5,000 with money that you have sitting outside already. So that's why I say you need money outside of the 401k. Okay, so I converted $20,000 in the year 2021. That means 5 years forward in the year 2026, I can now take that $20,000 out and without any penalty whatsoever. In the next year, I'm going to take another $20,000, convert it, pay my $5,000 in taxes. 5 years later in 2027, I get $20,000 out of that ladder, that Roth IRA. It just keeps going and going.
That's really cool.
That's savvy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that was super cool advice, and some of those terms that you're teaching Ryan and I too, which is really cool because we're so specific to, we have 401ks to work, but we're so specific to real estate. It's just cool to learn about all these other strategies. I kind of want to talk strategy a little bit here too, because it sounds like I understand how you created your income through investing and that you're drawing back on it. But can you talk about the balance between investing and paying off debt? And maybe what your overall strategy would be? There are some people that say, i.e. Dave Ramsey, that you shouldn't invest or do anything until you pay off all your debt. I don't agree with that, but I'm curious what your stance is.
Yeah. My husband and I talk about this concept called leverage. Debt can be leveraged. And as real estate investors, you guys are probably already actively doing that. I don't know if you bought all of your properties all cash. Probably not, right? You took out some mortgage on it.
Not yet.
Not yet. That's leverage because you know that this investment is going to generate you returns that are greater than the cost of financing that debt. That's called leverage. And the funny thing is both my husband and I in the management consulting industry, we actually we advise private equity clients. They're known as leverage buyout companies. What do? They buy companies, put on debt on that company, and then generate cash flow and then sell it out. That's what they do. So we learned that concept from them. I'll give it in very straight terms. My husband had some loans from college. Like he had a small amount that his scholarship didn't cover. Let's say that those student loans were at 4%. Then let's say that he took on another, call it, $100,000 of loans for business school. Business school loans, he got charged a higher interest rate at, call it 7%. He did not actively spend his life paying down the college loans early because he's like, if my loans cost me 4% in interest, but I'm getting 10% return on the market, why should I be in a hurry to pay off those loans because I get a six point spread on the market, right? So in these situations, I often say, look at the interest rates on your loans. If you've already been paying your loans on time and you don't have capitalized interest, what I mean by that is some people kind of let their loans lapse a little bit or they're under certain income repayment programs, income-driven programs where the interest is actually growing, then that's different. But let's say you are an on-time strategy, you're paying back those loans and the loan interest rate is pretty low. I call it 5%, less than 5%. I wouldn't be in a hurry to try to pay down those loans. I'd say you're in a good position to both pay off your debt and invest at the same time because the market returns more. But if your interest rates on your loans are 5% or greater, or you've let the loan lapse, then I would be a little bit more focused in at least getting rid of those debts. So when my husband and I married, we really focused on, okay, how do we get rid of this student loan debt from his business school? Because it was 7%. And we're like, let's just pay it off. Because if after you account for taxes and stuff, it's about the same return as the return on the market. Because you get 10% return on the market, but you still got to pay some taxes on it. So that's why we made the decision to pay off the student loans there early and then go back to investing.
It's a really cool strategy. And we equate this to real estate investing too, where we've talked to a lot of people in the investing game who are highly leveraged. And what they say is if interest rates are so low right now, we're getting an investment property loan at 3%. Mm-hmm. Why would we pay off the loan right now? Even we can't, but even in shorter time, why would we pay it off if that 3% is going to be paid down with cheaper dollars in the future even? So it's like a really cool thought process for people out there that look at your interest loans or your interest on your loans and then determine whether or not you feel you can make a better return in the market and then base your decision off that. I love the advice. I think it's really cool.
It's interesting because it's almost like a ping pong table. You go back and forth on deciding what you want to do. And one day it'll be like, well, I just want to pay off all my debt as soon as possible and just get done with it. And then I can start investing. Then you're like, wait, what about compound interest and over time and how my money works for itself? Yeah. And I have a couple of people that ask me advice. They have, one of my colleagues, he has a 4% loan and then a 7% so kind of a similar example to you. And I think I'm going to make him listen to this episode and, adhere that advice. And he should start today. I know the 7% he should probably start tackling first, but he can invest at this moment and he shouldn't wait.
Yeah, but it's also interesting. And I think Shang can maybe speak a little bit on this. If you are a doctor and you have $200,000 to $300,000 worth of student loans that you took out, and you're in a repayment program, does it sometimes make sense to stay in that program and not attack the debt just based on the fact that you're making, maybe say you're making 150 as a first time, as a new doctor and your loans are 300 grand, should you try to attack that debt where your income is not as high yearly as the debt is?
Yeah.
I guess it's strategy based on their, everyone's tolerance, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
There is no perfect answer when it comes to debt repayment. I respect Dave Ramsey for him understanding the psychology of people in mostly credit card debt, actually consumer debt. He understood that psychology, and he understood that people need to get that out to feel freedom. But when we're talking about people with student loans, it's a little bit of a different beast because it's almost an investment in yourself to get that higher income, right? What I have coached multiple people under different income-driven payment plans. Some of them are actually in the public student loan forgiveness program, where after making 120 payments and sticking with the job that qualifies you for it, the rest is completely forgiven without any tax implications. But there are others who might be in income-driven programs where, your minimum payments are less now, but whatever gets forgiven, you still owe like a 5-figure tax bill on a 6-figure debt.
Yep. That's the balloon.
Yeah, that's the tax bomb.
The bomb. Sorry,
and people need to save up for that. And I've known of people who didn't, and then they have this IRS loan after paying off their student loan, which is horrible.
Yeah, we interviewed Lauren Williams, who's like she's a student loan like financial planner, and she talked a little bit about that, and it surprised so many people that are actually in the program. So 20 years from now, you have to pay, if you have $200,000, you have to pay 60 grand or whatever it is. It's scary. So
yeah, I think these repayment programs lull people into a false sense of security, because people just look at the minimum payment. They're like, oh, it's so much lower than I expected. I can totally do whatever else I want. And I think if you have it and you need temporary relief, there's absolutely no shame in using this for that temporary relief. But there is a price to be paid, whether it is you being stuck in a job that qualifies you for these programs for 10 years, which is a really long time to commit to a single job or a single industry, or it is making sure that whatever money you do end up saving, you're putting it to good use. Like, I would hope that you're establishing an emergency fund and that you're getting some savings going and you're living below your means. But I've also seen people who end up with really low student loan monthly payments, and they just blow the rest of the money. And I think your strategy really has to be disciplined into saying, okay, if I choose to take advantage of a program, am I prepared for the tax implications, if any? And then am I prepared if I decide to leave this program? Can I get my savings up to cover that? And is the money that I'm saving being productive, or is it being spent on stuff that, I didn't really mean to buy?
So I think you mentioned this with, like, you talked about basics and you talked about emergency fund and savings account. I think people get overwhelmed when they realize how many different vehicles are out there to potentially invest in, and like different avenues. And we had this analogy of basically a table, and you want to add more legs to it, essentially, to have more income streams. Because if you have a table with one leg, you knock that leg out, you have no income, your financial health is in ruin. So do you have almost like not a blueprint, but just a basic set of, whether it's accounts or vehicles that you recommend someone start with, to say like, hey, listen, like, here's how to enhance your overall financial health starting out, and then you can always add more as you go along?
Absolutely. Number one, before you do anything, even before you pay off debt, is get an emergency fund, which is hard because it's hard to see the cash sitting there. You can't touch it for your credit card loans, and you can't touch it to go start investing. But as COVID has proved to all of us, it is absolutely devastating to be without income for even a month at a time. So you need that emergency, because we just don't know if another pandemic, God forbid, is going to hit us or something close to that. So I always say get that emergency fund going, 3 to 6 months of bills in an ideal scenario. But even 1 month breaks you of the paycheck to paycheck mentality. Okay, you got that? Next part, okay, assuming you're debt free now, because we can talk about debt all day long, but let's not focus on debt. Assuming you're debt free or you're ready to invest, the first thing I like to do is use an employer sponsored plan, like a 401k, 403, 457, TSP. Why? Because it's automatic. you don't feel the pain as much when you never see that money hit your bank account. The reason why I recommend that is if you do start to open an IRA today, you have to actively save up the money to move to the IRA. And it's very tempting, again, to spend the money. So I want to take it off the top. Once you've maxed out, maxing out means contributing $19,500 in tax year 2021 to the employer-sponsored plan, then I would move to either a traditional or Roth IRA. A ton of people freeze right here and they say, which one, traditional or Roth? You'll figure that out. There is no right answer. I say just toss a coin and pick one right now. You'll figure it out later. Open a Roth IRA. If you happen to make enough money, you still exceed that, then we can move to some more sophisticated instruments. Like if you have a health savings plan, a health savings account, I recommend that. Then a taxable brokerage, which is anybody can open, anyone can withdraw from at any time. Then beyond that, if you have children, there are other ways to save for their education, like the 529s and et cetera. But to recap, emergency fund in cash in a high yield online savings account, followed by employer sponsored account because you want that automatic off the top. Then followed by a traditional or Roth IRA, toss a coin if you can't pick. Then followed by a health savings account if you have one, or moving to a taxable brokerage.
Amazing. Great. That was amazing.
It's like you really have this. Your story is really like the simple path to wealth in a way.
I love that book.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so you're not doing anything fancy, Shang. You're just making sure that you have that income spread between your income and your expenses. And what percentage of your savings are you investing? Just for people out there that are thinking, I want to be like you.
I would say before we bought our home, we have a Manhattan home now. Before we did that, everything went into investments other than having the emergency fund.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Everything.
So you establish this emergency fund and maybe it grows depending upon your lifestyle and you can shift it around. But as soon as you have that, you're telling people, understand what that is, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year, if people are comfortable, 18 months, whatever it is. Once you have that, you know what you spend, invest the rest. And I think it's really, it's proven it's working.
So it was a perfect blueprint. So people should write that down.
Yeah.
Also,
and another thing I forgot to mention, like I'm also increasing my income this entire time. I side hustled for 10 years as a wedding photographer. I made in profits $200,000 that I never touched. I never spent on myself. I invested all of that. That helped a lot. And my husband and I are actively trying to increase because I just went part-time. We were actively trying to increase our income at the same time. And I would say since we got married, our household income, if we were both full-time, has also doubled. So there's not only me going from 30% to 50% savings rate, it's also an acceleration of our income where if we kept our lifestyle the same, then all of that extra bonus is gravy. And especially for the female audience who's listening to this, negotiate. Like, don't be afraid to ask for more because negotiating is the primary way that you're going to get more salary, more commission, more dollars per hour at your main job.
You just have my head spinning.
That's incredible to bring up. Can you dive in? If you don't have specifics, I could kind of catch you on the fly here, but what are some negotiation tactics to increase your salary and show your worth? Because I think people hear that all the time. They're like, well, what book do I read? Like, how do I know how to approach the conversation? I'm scared. Do you have anything maybe from prior experience that you went in with the plan and could share with everyone?
Yeah. So it's really interesting because my current company actually is very transparent with their salaries and there's clear bands. So there is no negotiating at my current company, but I've negotiated all my life. And here's what you need to know. You need to know the data, hard and cold. You need to know yourself and the value that you add to the company. And you also need to understand the company's position and ability to pay you. The data, you go on glassdoor.com, you go on salary.com, you Google, what does a blank, blank, blank make? What's a salary? At least know the average. I also actively network with recruiters. I actively interview, not because I want to leave my company, because I want to make sure I'm still getting paid top dollar for my talent. And a lot of the interviewing allows me to see whether I am over or underpaid or whatever. Usually people do this because they think they're underpaid. You got all that data. And then if you aspire to something greater, you got to network and talk to those people who earn a ton more than you, and ask, how did they get there? What qualifications, what certifications, what skill sets do you have? Data is everything right now. Data analytics is huge. If you can read data, that's a huge part. Do I need an MBA or not? Not everybody needs an MBA, but what proof points do recruiters and hiring managers need to see on that resume? Then you at least got to meet that minimum. Then when you're ready to negotiate with the company, then you got to bring all that to the table. And I always say, add more on top. Always go above the number that you think you're going to get. Never start with the number that you think you're going to end up with. And just be honest, say, blah, 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 source one, source two. These data points tell me and that this job should be in this range. And I believe that I add more value with this skill set, that certification, with the projects that are proven in the past. Therefore, I believe that my compensation or whatever benefits, or however way you want to structure it, is that much. And you always do this, never in writing, always over phone or in person. But obviously with COVID, you can't. You got to talk to the hiring manager and show that. And hopefully by that time, because they already want to hire you, this is a position to negotiate. Once you sign the contract, then it's kind of locked in. So in the time that they're still trying to woo you as the company, you negotiate. And if they say no, walk away, because it's like a toxic relationship. You never want to stick with a company that doesn't pay your worth. It's not worth it.
Shang, you might have just hooked your boy up with a raise. So that's awesome though. I think that's great. Super helpful and tactful information.
Any recommendations for if you work in a family business? No, I'm just kidding. That's what I do. So I need like a crash course, because it's totally different ballgame. But I really appreciate that. Rye has a question, and then I have something like about your just your mental balance with everything. So go ahead.
So I know we talked basics and specific accounts, vehicles. We touched on taxes a little bit, and you kept bringing it up. And I don't know how deep we want to go here, but I'm wondering if you could just give us some tactics that you use to optimize your taxes in a way to help with, I guess, snowballing the increase in finance. Yeah.
The reason why I recommended both the 401k and the IRAs to start over, like just opening an account with Robinhood, is because they give you tax advantages, either today or in the future. It depends on traditional versus Roth. And I've calculated that for the average person, if you do not take advantage of a retirement account, you may lose up to 20-30% of your net worth to taxes by not watching this area. So when you're doing stock investing, you do want to try to max out these tax advantages before going to a taxable brokerage. And then for fire bloggers, there's also advantages there. Like, have you ever wondered why there's a lot of fire bloggers that live overseas?
Actually, didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know.
But there are. Okay. A lot of the really famous ones are overseas because there is a foreign earned income tax exclusion, in that the first $130,000 or so of your foreign earned income, as long as you pass the bona fide test that you were overseas for the majority of the year, you do not get taxed at the U.S. tax rates. You may still owe taxes in another country, but many other countries have lower tax rates compared to the U.S.
Wow. Whoa. So Mr. Mustache and the Mad Scientists, are my guys overseas now?
They're not. But one of my favorite fire bloggers, Go Curry Cracker, is in Taiwan. And this is the tactic that they use. Okay. And also you want to be careful about how you withdraw your investments, right? If you do short-term gains, you're taxed at a higher rate than long-term gains. I'm getting really technical here. But I would say the key tactics that a lot of fire bloggers use is, first, cram as much money as you can into tax advantage accounts, and then move your butt to a state that charges no income tax.
I wonder why everyone's going to Austin, Texas. It's crazy.
Yeah, because that can be very, very meaningful. And my husband and I don't intend to stay in New York State because the taxes are just insane long term. Right now it's fine, but it's not likely forever.
Cool. I have sort of a mindset question framing like how you do or continue to do what you do. How do you balance living your life in the moment and now you're able to do it a little bit more. But for the past several years or so, how do you balance that with making sacrifices for your future? Because there will be some people that say, I want to live for the now. I want to spend my money. And by the way, if that makes you happy, I think that's what people should do. Right. Mm-hmm. But how have you balanced saying, putting the things that you want off and living in that apartment that was crappy for the period of time that you did?
Yeah. This is my hashtag I get to attitude, in that I think we all have, as human beings, we have very basic core emotional and mental needs that do need to be met. Emotional safety in a relationship or in a family. Physical safety, I think, is important. Companionship, which COVID has absolutely wrecked for this extrovert. I am dying to hug a friend.
Yeah, you're talking to two, so it's brutal.
Yeah, and those needs are legitimate, but they don't need to be met with a lot of money. So whenever, and I know the stats, the median American lives until age 79. People aren't dying at age 40. They're not dying at age 50. You might see some of that example in your life, but the average American lives to 80 years old, but probably does not want to work past age 60. It's hard work to work. With that in mind, I made the calculations, and I remember sitting in my apartment one day, and I didn't love it at the time. I hated the apartment. I had to walk 4 flights of stairs up. It's tiny, it's narrow. The bathroom is breaking. I have dishes to wash. I had to go to the laundromat down the street to do my laundry, and it's like, 0 degrees, and it's my turn. And I'm like, oh, shoot me right now. But I started saying that I said, I get to live in a warm apartment on a cold winter day, because I know people don't get that. I get to be employed. I know not everybody has that. I get to have a full belly. Not everybody gets that. And as though whenever I fell into a situation that was hard, like having to walk home in the rain because I don't want to shell out money for a cab, I'd be like, I get to have 2 legs to walk. And by using that one phrase, it unlocks the privilege that I didn't recognize. But it also meant that I was meeting my most basic needs. Take food, for example. I love eating out. My friends are foodies. I am very triggered whenever they post pictures of beautiful food and, haute cuisine. But what I realized was what was triggering my mind, what my desire to eat out wasn't necessarily because I love good food. It's part of it. But when I really, really dug deep into myself, I said, why is it that you always want to eat out? I realized that I equated eating out with companionship. I was actually lonely because whenever I was with friends, we were eating out. So that's kind of where my mind went to. And once I realized it wasn't about eating out, it was about being lonely, I just started asking friends to hang out with me in different contexts. Like we would go to networking events together. I have a networking budget that's actually pretty generous. Or to go take walks around Central Park, or let's do a breakfast, like a bagel costs nothing in New York. And so once I decoupled the cost of the item from the actual need that I was meeting, I started meeting my real needs. I was creative and frugal, but I met it, and that's what allowed me to be happy.
Incredible. Really, really cool. The next question is, because I don't even know how to add on to that, because it was great, was why do you think so many people accept the 40-hour work week for 40 years of your life to enjoy 15 of freedom? Because right now, I think about the pain that it would put me through after discovering the FIRE movement through real estate to have to do that. Now, that takes away from the gratitude that you're talking about too, because even if I did have to do that, I would still have my 2 legs. I'd still be who I am, but I'm so destined, I feel like, to do the financial independence movement. Why do you think so many people just fall into the trap of just waking up, going to work, and not really pursuing anything other than that?
Perhaps because popular media portrays that as this is what it's supposed to be. Like, this is normal. I mean, even if you look at the age 59 and a half, and then like the age 65 that is commonly put out there as that should be your retirement age. I mean, it's all built into the systems. And people often look at FIRE movement people and say, like, you guys are freaks, or like, we're really weird. I was featured in the New York Post as a cheapskate. I'm like, I'm not cheap. I'm actually like, I probably donate the same amount of money as I live on in a single year to charities. I wouldn't call that a cheapskate move.
No, not at all.
It is not.
That's
So they just,
that's kind of pissing me off.
yeah,
honestly.
that
I'm
makes
sorry.
me mad. Like that they would write,
But,
We're in your
but
corner
that's
now,
how the media portrays us.
yeah. If you need anyone to,
Bad boys, I got you.
It was fun though. That was actually my first like big media coverage, and it exploded into other things, which was fun. So I'm still grateful for that. But I think it's because people we're very, very bad at estimating the cost of future things. Like we're super bad at saying, wow, I locked myself into a 30-year mortgage, and all these financial institutions break down the numbers, right? They're like, oh, yes, it's call it $300,000 mortgage, but you only pay $2,000 a month. You can totally do it. Or, yeah, that's $1,000 iPhone, but you only have to pay $100 a month for 10 months to get it. The same psychology that the companies, the financial institutions use to lock you into these things that you end up paying for your life is the same psychology that I used to tell people, break your big loan into small numbers to pay it off, or break your financial freedom number, that $1 million, whatever, into really, really small numbers to work off of it. And I tend to say the rules it's arbitrary. We made up these rules. And we can break the rules too, because I can make my own. And as long as I'm confident in who I am, who cares what I do?
Exactly, Shang. It's so funny. I was like itching to jump in there because I equate it to the commercials about luxury vehicle leases, right? And I just went through this with a friend of mine who wanted to buy or lease a car. So I noticed I'm looking at the just the marketing that goes into what the psychology is for consumers. It's brutal. You say $335 a month, all you need is $4,000 down and you get this beautiful luxury car. They get you to the dealership, right? When you're at the dealership, there is a 0% chance that you're walking away paying that $335 a month, because I was there with my friend and it ended up being $575 a month with the warranty and the tires and this and that. And they figure once you get there, you're probably not going to leave because you drove the car and it's awesome. And it's just like that psychology of like, you're a consumer. So are you going to be the consumer that goes and spends, or are you going to be the person that invests and grows your money and has your money grow for you? And it's like, it's hard, but you're living proof. And I just think it's kind of like disturbing the way that the American media, I don't know if it's like this in other countries, treats the people, but it is all about money. I mean, I get it.
There's billions of dollars poured into behavioral psychology to get people to spend. The social media apps that we use today are engineered to get us to be hooked like a drug and to watch the lifestyles of the supposedly rich and famous people and think that we have to live like that. And I would say, luxury items, big houses, big cars, aesthetically, they look nice. I get it. We are visual beings. We see that. We're like, it's nice. It gives us a hit of happiness. But I have experienced luxury. And I would say, yes, there is higher quality to a certain extent, but that flashy item, that happiness fades. It's a hit. And then you need a bigger hit the next time. It's a drug. Whereas if you can recognize gratitude in what you have right now, no matter where you are, then that hedonistic adaptation, that desire to have to keep adapt to higher living standards, you stop that by saying, I'm okay with what I got because I've met my needs. And if I focus on stuff that people regret on their deathbeds, people never regret, oh my gosh, I wish I had a bigger house. But people really regret not spending time with their loved ones. And that's what I care about.
Beautifully said. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. So I hope people listen to that.
I just keep thinking about this consumer culture we're talking about in the I forget what it's actually called, but on Netflix, there's a documentary about how addicting your
the social dilemma.
Yeah, I believe that's what it's called. I had to scroll past it because I knew it was so true. And I'm like, I'm going to be so regretful for a lot of things I do. However,
it is true, but like, I don't know. I saw it and I was like, there's ways around this, but go ahead.
My point is basically, if you're going to go on the app anyways, say you hear everybody's advice and you're like, hey, listen, I'm using the app anyways. There are tactics around it to kind of get you information that's going to benefit your life. Like for us specifically, think about like the FI movement, how we've met you. I, at one point, did an exercise where I wiped out everyone that I followed. That was like from high school or from college. And I'm like, dude, why do I don't care what their lives are doing.
Distractions.
And I started following the financial independent movements and like the big hitters and the FI bloggers and real estate investors. And I'm like, that's now when I scroll in my feed, all my content is how to raise more money, how to invest, how to save money, and just like the whole cycle of it. So it like subliminally changed my thoughts and how I went about things. I find myself like, talk about the outfit thing, talk about the car thing. There's like a lot in us specifically getting into real estate. It's like, I don't know when we first started thinking about it, but maybe it was back when I changed all these followers and things. So it's interesting that plays a big role on who you are. And I think people should give it a shot. I'll get off my soapbox because I do have a different conversation to jump into, but we know you're a big traveler. So are we. And one of our first episodes, we had one of my good buddies on the show, and he talked about credit card churning, travel hacking, and we dove in, but it's been a while, probably about 35, 40 episodes. So I'd love to go into that topic and get your advice for people, just starting out. Maybe they want to get a card that benefits them and how they basically can use a credit card to benefit their life. Let's say specifically travel hacking. Can you dive into that subject?
Yeah. I like to say travel hacking is my way of giving a middle finger to credit card companies who hold a lot of consumer debt. Yeah. That being said, this is not recommended if you cannot spend with your credit card like you would a debit card. I don't see credit as credit. I see it as that's money coming out of my bank account. So that's the first mindset that you got to have before you go to travel hacking. My husband and I, our strategy is focused on sign-up bonuses. There are other ways of doing travel hacking. Some people do what's called stacking, where they put an offer on top of an offer and on top of an offer. Other people do something that I consider a little bit more of a gray area called manufactured spend. I will not go into that. That's not what I do.
We've heard about it, but to me, I was like, am I like
it's gray.
Every law possible with this thing?
Yeah. So travel hacking is this. Credit cards are able to offer you points and miles and loyalty programs with the aim of getting you hooked so that you would spend more with that program. The points that they give you is actually discounted to the credit card company or to the issuer of the program because then they try to do every which way possible to make it hard for you to spend the points. But again, my husband and I are very good at gaming this. You look for a really big sign up. I love following blogs like 1 Mile at a Time. The points guy is big. And then there's also a bunch of other forums, and they all surface these affiliate links. Say, okay, 100,000 points at sign up. He needs to sign up and spend minimum of $3,000 within 90 days or something to meet that minimum. And my husband and I do this because we tithe 10% of our gross income. With 2 6-figure salaries, that's 5 figures of tithing each year that we can put on our credit cards. So we use our tithing to meet the minimums. We try to go for credit cards where we know we're going to use the points. So we actually plan our destinations about a year in advance. Say, okay, what is it going to take for us to go to Hong Kong? Or what is it going to take for us to go to, our next trip is hopefully South Africa, got canceled, but that's the next trip.
I want to go so bad.
Yeah, I've never been, but it's credible. And then we look at the airlines that service that, or the hotels that we want to stay at. I'm kind of a hotel snob. I have my favorites. So we say, which program is it? And then we look for their transfer partners or look for the points that meet those. So for example, my husband and I almost never fly Southwest or JetBlue. So those cards, even though they're really great credit cards, we never sign up for, almost never. We do have a JetBlue card now. Sorry, because it didn't make sense at the time. And so we look for the cards that offer the points and the bonuses that make sense for that trip. We sign up, we meet the minimum, we get the points, we spend it right away to book that trip because the points devalue over time. What happens is that over time, what a hotel room that normally would have cost 30,000 points a night, the hotel chain will eventually move it up to 40,000 points. They'll move it to 50,000 points. It's their way of inflating and devaluing your points to get it off their balance sheet. And then we meet that minimum, then we kind of don't really use the card. After about a year, the card's going to come back and start charging me that annual fee, right? That's when I call in and I say, I'm going to cancel this card. Sometimes they like me enough and they'll retain me with an offer of maybe another 10, 20,000 points. I'm like, fine, I'll take that. Sometimes they won't. The reason why then that's the churn. You cancel the card, you sign up for another card, you keep doing this. The reason why I can do this and still maintain a very high credit score is because I anchor my credit file with very, very old accounts. I have the very first American Express blue credit card, no annual fee since 2003, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, 2003.
People behind the scenes at the credit card companies are like, "Damn it, Chung, you're ruining our plan to get everyone to spend all this stuff." Like it's and I'm doing something similar. I haven't done like the one where I stop it. I just put all my expenses every single month on my credit card and then pay it off at the end of the month. So I'm like getting like small bonuses.
You're a baby.
Yeah, I'm a baby. She's murdering it. Yeah,
my husband's the one doing this. But the downside is you do have to spend a lot of time in spreadsheets, keeping track of your points. And then when you actually want to go and make these bookings, especially when we want to get business class tickets, they only release like 2 business class seats, per flight using points. So you have to be the first one. That's why we're booking our trips 9 to 12 months in advance to be the first ones on the phones with the CSRs. By the way, special trick for people trying to get through to the customer service department of any company, dial the Spanish line. They almost always speak English. They almost always speak English. So you say, "Oh, sorry, got the wrong number. Do you speak English?"
That is the highlight of the show.
That's incredible.
So that's how you get ahead.
That is so incredible because if I have to sit on Comcast's line one more time, I can't stand that.
That is seriously brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
It seems so basic now. I'm pissed that I didn't do it.
Wow.
Because so many of those customer service companies are based in Latin America where they have to be bilingual anyway.
We're gonna have to do that with our new mortgage company that's out of I don't even know where.
Oh my oh god.
But yeah, do you
so just one thing. So I love that you brought up the anchor strategy because a lot of people, including myself, I'm like, okay, how do you keep opening up credit cards and canceling them and not having it impact your score? Like I get it, right? This is how I can conceptualize this whole idea is like, I have a card from my oldest card is, I don't know. 2003 is amazing. I have 2013, I think it is. Mm-hmm. Cool. 8 years now. But then in between, if I like opened up a card and then canceled it, like, isn't it the average age of credit is basically like, that's a big factor in your score. I'm trying to figure out how you can keep consistently opening these cards up with no impact on your score.
Because there's 5 factors that actually go into your credit score. The biggest one is you paying your balances on time. That's the biggest one. On-time payments, followed by how much of your credit limit are you using, utilization, right? Then the age of accounts does matter, but it's an average across all of your accounts. Between my husband and myself, I think at any point we have like 10 credit cards per person. Like there's a lot of cards that are going on. So, and with those anchor cards, or we have multiple anchor cards in place by averaging out, we just have a long history. We also tend to do signups and cancellations in the same month. If you reduce the number of times in the year that you do this churn, the hit is only one time to your credit score. It comes back up. I've looked at it, tracked this. It takes about 2 to 3 months for the score to come back up from a cancellation. And the utilization is huge. I think we maybe use like 1% of our credit. We have insanely high credit limits. We call in each year and just say, "Hey, our income grew. Are you going to lift my credit limit?" They're like, "Yeah, sure." So we have like really, really high credit limits. We don't spend that much outside of the churn periods. So that helps. Those are all tactics that help. And as long as you're not actively financing, like you're not applying for a loan, you're not applying for a mortgage, who cares what your credit score is? It only matters when you're looking into financing. And if then, like when my husband and I did decide to take on a mortgage to buy our home in Manhattan, we stopped all of this at least 6 months before we decided to apply for a mortgage, knowing that our credit score had to remain really healthy for that period of time.
It was a masterclass right there. So thank you very much.
That was huge. Thank you. Thank you.
This is Rye's favorite part of the show. We just determined it last episode, the core 4. And I'm going to let you talk about Save My Sense at the end, because I want you to plug that. I want people to go to check your blog and your site out. But the core 4 is kind of 4 questions. We ask the same every week. And
just to get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. And I normally do the second question, but I'll do the first. What is your favorite investing or business book that has impacted your life?
The business book is probably, gosh, it's so hard because there's so many good ones.
There's like 70,000 running through. Knowing you now, there's like many running through your head. It's probably.
I saw on your blog that you did it like a succession plan of like which, like you start with the Millionaire Next Door, I believe, and then you went to another book and then another one. I'll plug that later in the end of the episode, but I think you could pick any of those and they're amazing.
Let me just, I'm very bad at remembering titles. Okay, here we go. The Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Huh. Nobody said that on our show. That's awesome.
This is a great book, primarily because I was in the tech industry before I went back to management consulting, and startups are all about, quote unquote, move fast and break things. I don't like things broken. But anyway, the thing is, the attitude that book taught me was don't wait to perfect product before you push it, right? You're going to learn from your first customers. I didn't have as nice of a coaching platform as I do today. My Instagram sucked when I first started out. My first course was written with Microsoft Word. It had like no beautiful graphics. And I think one person complained, they're like, yeah, it looks kind of boring. But I pushed it out to get that feedback, because otherwise, if I spend hours and days trying to perfect a product, then I actually might have the wrong idea about what people actually want, and then not push out anything useful.
This is so cool.
That's really good advice.
Rye's a perfectionist in our group, and I'm like, just push it out. Like, who cares? Like, and
I'm getting better too, but not great.
No, but he. I mean, this is why he's good at what he does. Like, but I think perfection is the enemy of progress. So I agree with you.
Yeah, like I'm a loser. It's all good. I'm just messing. So good.
But perfection it's good to have perfection though. In certain aspects, like engineering a house, you do want to have good structure. You don't want to.
You're not looking at engineers.
Have a bad foundation.
Thank you.
Okay. That's second question.
Brilliant. Sorry.
Of the core four. Go ahead, Rye.
So, what's been your biggest mistake that you've made in your investing career, and how have you learned from it?
I've only recently started sharing this because I was really ashamed about it for a long time. And I'm like, no shame. People need to learn from this. It is getting sold a whole life insurance policy. I hate it. Basically, I fell for the classic trap of I was looking for a financial advisor. Somebody said, I'm one, I'm going to let me look through your portfolio. And then they started selling me on this whole life insurance policy as a way to protect my assets and have growth. And then later, as I Googled, I realized basically it like grows at the pace of a bond. I still have it today because I also am lost. I have this loss aversion. I don't want to give it up. And it's a very, very small amount of my portfolio. But to this day, I tell people, if you start seeing someone sell you a life insurance policy under the guise of being your financial advisor, run, not walk away, run away. Yeah.
So
term life is better, but I don't really know a lot. I don't have life insurance.
Term life is okay if you have dependents. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's good. I have kind of a hybrid. So basically, but it's like a cash. How do I phrase this? It's almost like a cash accruing account, and then you can pull it out. Is that what you're talking about?
It's basically like that. Basically.
So why do you advise against it now? Like, why is that a mistake again?
Because I wanted high growth. I wanted market growth, and this thing was going to grow at the pace of a bond. So yes, it's going to sit there. It's going to have cash, and it is not likely to ever lose value. Whereas in stocks, I have that risk, but it just doesn't match my profile today. I'm not that conservative. I want risk. I have decades to go in my life. And so it wasn't the right decision at that time. So
inflation's beating you up there, I guess, is kind of the whole thing.
But, it's really good advice.
Okay, third question. Who is your who for 2021? And we started talking about who versus how. Like, who is your who? And by meeting this person, you feel your life or your business could be propelled to the next level. Like, who do you need to meet? And if you don't know the answer to that, maybe who have you met in the past couple of years that have helped propel your business?
Yeah. My crush is Geisha Haas. Her last name is spelled Haas. She is the founder of Dreamers and Doers, a wonderful network of women, primarily in the tech space, in the venture raising space. She's bootstrapping this company, and she's running it with 2 kids out of Wyoming, where she and her husband live. All remote, and it's incredible. It's all about giving back, having its members give to each other radically, because it is so difficult to be a female founder in the tech space. And I commend her for that. And I try to embrace that same radical kindness and giving approach. And also, we both have kids around the same age, so it's really nice to have that in common.
Awesome,
love that.
Very, very cool.
So I got a thinker for you. What do you want your legacy to be when all is said and done?
it's a prayer that I've prayed over my son that I wish for him, but it's also I wish for myself is that I would leave the world better than I found it. And for me, that means impact. And impact can mean so many different things, but in my current life, my current iteration, it is impacting others to change the money story, the money narrative for their families positively and forever. In my past side hustles in photography, I said is to change the way that people, view themselves through a beautiful lens. But that's what Save My Sense is about. I don't take pay from Save My Sense. Yes, I sell courses, I sell coaching. 100% of net proceeds are donated or earmarked for a scholarship foundation that I hope to leave when I die. I want to set up a foundation to help others afford school.
Incredible. You and our last guest, we just had Andrew Kerr on from House Hacking Podcast, and he said he's like a philanthropist as well. And it's awesome. I aspire to give back as much as I earn or dedicate a specific business to giving back like you did. So that's really cool.
That's a perfect segue onto Save My Sense. You kind of gave us one of the whys behind it, but if you could just walk all of our listeners through your blog, your Instagram, why you created it, how you created it, and like what you hope to get out of it long term.
Yeah. It started out as just focusing on the basics of personal finance, but then I realized there's a million accounts that do that. Save My Sense really focuses on retirement and wealth building, soup to nuts. So I teach in the Save My Retirement Masterclass all the ins and outs of the 401ks, the IRAs, because it's complex and no one teaches you this in school. And then suddenly they hand you a job with a 401k. You're expected to know all this? Heck no, you need to be taught, or you can learn on your own. So I teach that in a crash course. My content focuses on showing people that it is not hard to invest. It's not hard to invest in this buy and hold strategy with index funds. You just gotta focus on putting your money where your values are. And that means saving, investing, and increasing your income. Like I do really encourage as many people as possible to work hard and negotiate up their salaries while they're at it to add extra firepower to your journey to fire.
Wonderful.
Love it.
The last segment of our show is called The Last Drop. And in this segment, we just ask you if you could give advice to your younger self. What do you think you would tell younger Shang?
If you could go back in time.
Yeah. I was such a boring person as a teenager.
Maybe to be more exciting.
I would tell myself not to take everything so seriously, and both seriously and personally. I got offended at like the most random things as a child, and I would just take offense and start a lot of drama with an online blog account that I had back then. And then I realized there's no point in spending your life trying to control what other people do. Just live your life, be joyful and love what you do. And if other people benefit, like if people benefit from me sharing my story, I'm glad. But hey, if you choose not to be frugal, like my husband and I choose not to go on fire, that's okay too. Like there is no rule around it. You just gotta make sure you're happy with your choices.
That's what that's what our show is all about. Like living life on your own terms and being happy and doing what you want. So if spending your entire paycheck, every paycheck makes you happy and you live on the thrill and you want to do that, like we would never tell somebody to not do that. We just think that there's another way if you want to retire early. So that's awesome. First of all, thank you so much for coming on. This has been one of our best episodes and you have so much knowledge. I'm going to send everyone to Save My Sense, which leads me to, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out to you, maybe to learn more about you? They like your story and they want to connect.
Yeah. Find me on Instagram, Save My Sense, all one word. I also blog at savemysense.com. Instagram is my main thing. If you need to get, private questions answered, that Save My Retirement Masterclass pretty much answers most questions because it's modeled on my own path to fire.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure getting to know you. And I think there were so many nuggets throughout this entire episode that I know Corey and I learned a lot as well.
We did. We selfishly interview people that are really smart so we can learn too. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.